This show is sponsored by Koyeb.com. Visit the link in the show notes to check out Koyeb, a developer-friendly serverless platform to deploy apps globally. Stick around to our ad break to hear more about Koyeb. This is Cup of Go for September 22nd, 2023. I'm back. Keep up with the important happenings in the Go community in 15 minutes per week. I'm Shai Nechmad.
And I'm Jonathan Hall. Good to have you back, man.
Yeah, 100% less application development and fancy English accent, but a bit more securities, sprinkled up on top, some backend. We keep it varied.
How was your holiday?
I observed Rosh Hashanah with my family. It was a lot of fun. I actually listened to the episode and you mentioned it's a national holiday and I was like, not really. It's a Jewish holiday, but confusion is well warranted because it's really weird. Some national holidays are religious holidays and vice versa. But mostly, I really, really appreciate Andy. Thanks a lot, Andy, for covering for me and letting me spend Friday with my family and eating, apples and honey and doing the rest of the things. And then providing me with a super fun episode to listen to during the week.
Awesome. Well, let's kick it off with a really quick reminder. GopherCon in San Diego starts on Tuesday. So if you're in the California area, which is a big area, if you're in the San Diego area, be sure to check out GopherCon.
Damn, I wish I was there.
Yeah. Maybe next year I can make it. But the guest we're interviewing later on is going to be there. So stick around to hear more from him and about what the Gopher Developer Network will be doing at GopherCon.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other conferences lined up for this quarter, and you can check out the better host, Andrew, telling you about it in the previous episode. All right, let's jump straight into it. Open Tofu, up there with the list of silliest names, but I like it. I try to stay at least 50% vegan, so having my tools be tofu.
Isn't 50% vegan just regular?
No, I mean like 50% of my meals are vegan and then the rest are normal, which the averages out to about 75%.
Okay, interesting.
So Open Tofu, which is the rebrand of OpenTF, has been announced by the Linux Foundation.
It's official.
Yeah, it's more official than it was, less official than it will be, as hopefully it makes its way through the CNCF graduation process. So OpenTF, if you've been living under a rock, HashiCorp had this tool called Terraform for infrastructure management. It was open source for like 9 years. They changed the license to be source available, the business license, same thing that MongoDB did and Elasticsearch, which is totally fine, trying to protect their business. And a whole bunch of companies that stand to pay a lot for this license change forked the Terraform project into OpenTF, now rebranded into OpenTofu and made it into the Linux Foundation, which is a big step. It does make it more official-ish. And you shared with me a blog post that I want to highlight that says this is not a correct way to represent it, that OpenTF is not a fork, right?
Yeah, so Ray Myers on LinkedIn, who's a staff reliability engineer at Indeed, wrote this interesting post that kind of puts a different spin on this topic. The headline is OpenTF, or now OpenTofu, is not the fork. And his argument is that historically, at least for many open source tools, when they have closed source version sort of dwindles and fades into obscurity. It's the open source fork that continues and lives on. So in that sense, by adding a closed source license, that was the act of forking to a closed source version. So OpenTF or OpenTofu is the continuation of the old one. And he points to Jenkins as an example of this. I think...
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Jenkins used to be called Hudson. I didn't know the history, and I haven't verified that this is accurate, but apparently Hudson went commercial, and Jenkins is the free version of that.
That we all know today, and like who knows about Hudson?
Other examples I can think of, a little bit less extreme example would be Maria database versus MySQL. Both are still active and proud, but I would imagine that Maria is a little bit more common these days. I certainly has been on the project I've been using. And I think we could point to 1,000 other examples too.
The one I like is BitKeeper. Do you remember that? Do you know what that is?
I know what it is.
So it used to host the Linux code until they changed license, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then they just went and built Git. So I guess they forked the capabilities. And, who knows about BitKeeper today, but every single developer in the world uses Git.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a few bank COBOL developers who still use SVN. I don't know. But anyways, OpenTofu is either the next big thing in the Linux Foundation or the greatest prank for everybody to say the words OpenTofu out loud. I feel like a total idiot. This is Go related, but it's not Go news. Let's do some Go news.
Let's do it.
There's a proposal I like. I like it because A, it's interesting, and B, it reminds us of a really cool feature. Go toolchain has Go test, which is one of the great things about it. You don't have to worry about, I want PyTest or unit test, or like what framework of test do I need to install? Is it Jest or Mocha or whatever? It just comes built in with the toolchain. And it has a lot of great features. One often overlooked is test minus shuffle. What does that flag do?
Well, so this is a flag I have heard about, but I never actually started using it until this last week. But it shuffles the order of the test execution, which is actually a pretty cool feature. So one of the principles that a lot of people talk about in the testing world is to make your tests first, or even first U as an extension. And this is basically an acronym to talk about your test should be fast, isolated or independent, repeatable, timely, and the U, if you use it, is understandable. And so this shuffle thing sort of tackles that I in the first acronym, the isolated or independent, by shuffling the order in which you run your tests. And if they fail when they run in the wrong, in quote, the wrong order, that means your tests are not independent.
Yeah, that happens if you have, let's just give a classic example. You have a test that relies on a DB. One test like writes a row and makes sure that it's written. The other test reads and makes sure there are no rows because nothing wrote there, right? You always run the read test first and the write test later, and it's going to work fine. Then you turn on shuffle, and 50% of the time your tests fail because you forgot to clean up your database in between execution, which is useful. Like, again, you should use this flag. Now, this proposal is all about what happens if you do two flags that are useful at once. Another flag that's useful is minus count, where you can run the test a whole bunch of times in case you have, some statistical issue and you want to iron out this flakiness. So you can run minus count 100 and the test will run 100 times. And there's a question in this proposal of what should happen if you have both flags on at once. Like if I turn on shuffle and I turn on count 100, should it shuffle the playlist and then repeat the playlist 100 times? Or should it be random every time? I guess it's a question that, Spotify engineers also had to face when they developed their shuffle and repeat buttons, right? But imagine you're listening on shuffle and you say it's random, but it's the same order every time it repeats. That's not really what you mean when you want it to run a lot of times on random. So what this proposal suggests is to change the shuffle seed in between multiple executions. And there's a lot of nuance here at the blog post, like what order should be in whatever. I actually commented it myself as well and even got a thumbs up, which I'm excited about. So you can go check it out. But mostly we wanted to remind you of this feature. If you don't run minus shuffle and minus count on your tests, you should do it. What other news items should we revisit?
So I think the big thing, we've talked about it 1,000 times. You're probably tired of hearing about it. If you are, hit the fast forward thing for a couple seconds here. But it's the for loop bug or issue or whatever you want to call it. And David Chase and Russ Cox wrote a great blog post about this issue and it being fixed in Go 1.22, which is just around the corner in about 5 months.
We're going to have to schedule some, special recording times for 1.22 because I think it's going to be a pretty interesting release. But we can't keep talking about this for loop thing anymore. I'm saying it now, until 1.22, unless there's some huge bug in the library or whatever because of this foot gun, we're not reminding of you of this again.
As far as I'm concerned, the bug is fixed. I'm already running the experiment in production. I can't think of a reason. And unless you've done that and discovered a breakage, you should be too. It's old news already. It's bridge under the water as far as I'm concerned. This is just the rubber stamp on the way things are already done.
And this connects pretty well with the backward compatibility blog post. It was released about a month ago, but we promised we'd get to it. So we were mentioning it. It's a really good blog post. It is kind of boring in the sense that it's obvious and it looks good and it's detailed and it's well written because Russ wrote it. So of course it's really well written. But it basically talks about Go's ongoing efforts to make the language more and more and more backward compatible as more and more minor versions come out. And I think this rollout of this bug fix is a really good example because they could have just fixed the for loop thing, and from now on, everything is incompatible. But look at how it's actually happening. Over the course of almost a year, it's transitioning from a proposal to an experiment to being rolled out to becoming the default over, the lifetime guarantees of the language. And you can still have it on using flags if you have a really big code base that, has this all over. So this blog post sort of goes over the promises for the future. and it ends up talking about Go 2.
Wait, when is Go 2 going to come out?
I think next month, right after Half-Life 3.
Right.
Yeah, and right after Half-Life 3 and
Fallout 5,
paid version of Linux. So they're talking about Go 2, where that there will not be a Go 2 that breaks Go 1 programs. Instead, they're going to double down on compatibility. So I think all the prophecies about there's going to be a Go 2, it's going to be a Python 2, Python 3 debacle. The language is just must go there. No, it just matured enough to avoid that problem. And all the people that were burned on upgrading Python 2 to Python 3, including myself, we don't have to worry about that.
That still bites me every once in a while.
So we don't have to worry about that for Go 2, which is super, super great. And if I were writing this blog post, I would just say, remember the Python thing? Not going to happen to Go. Here's why.
We don't want to throw shade on other languages, or do we?
Cool.
Let's talk about some things that we had brought to our attention on our famous Cup-A-Go Slack channel. Mm-hmm. If you're not already on there, you need to come join the channel, by the way, and the 225 other people who are there. But the first one was a blog post on a topic that is, I want to say near and dear to my heart, but it's actually kind of driving me crazy. So I don't know if that's really accurate.
A thin line between hate and love.
Yeah. And it's slog. So there are things I love about the new slog package in Go 1.21. And there's some things I kind of hate about it now too. And this blog post, link in the description, of course, is talking specifically about slog test, which is a new package that was included in Go 1.21 also to make testing of slog handlers easier. Now, I haven't used slog test very much. I've used it for one specific thing, and it did that particular thing very well. But I haven't used it for other things, and probably because it doesn't do those other things very well. And this blog post kind of goes through what slog test is, what it does well, and where it falls short. TLDR first, what does slog test do? It's a tool for testing slog handlers. So if you're just using slog as a consumer, you could ignore this. If you're writing a handler, suppose you want to log in a particular custom format or to a different API, maybe you want to send logs to Slack or to a particular whatever data ingestion tool or something like that that doesn't already have a handler, then this tool would be something you might use to ensure that you're producing, that your handler works as intended. The cons are that it doesn't give you much specific control over how you do those tests. It kind of just wraps everything up and gives you some output. Doesn't necessarily handle ordering of keys very well, or you have to do your own parsing of that output sometimes if you want to detect certain characteristics of your logs. And this is largely why I haven't used this tool. I've been writing some slog handlers to handle Google Cloud logging and Sentry and custom output for text, actually. I've been working on 3 different slog handlers, and I've only used slog test minimally because it doesn't give me the control I need. So the conclusion of the article is some proposals, informal proposals for how the slog test package could be improved. And then a quick update. There is a proposal added, which we've mentioned on the show before, to add support for subtests. That proposal has been accepted and has actually been merged and the issue closed already on GitHub. So we can look forward to that in Go 1.22. The slog test package will be improved.
I think it's kind of rough around the edges, but important to highlight that it's a lot better to sort of slog around with this package and write your own parser and worry about that for like 2 hours and come out with a headache rather than log incorrect things in production. Because it's notoriously hard to see logging bugs, right? The hardest bug to discover is in the report a bug form because you can't really see it. What I'm worried about is, not just ordering of keys and stuff like that, but, incorrect formatting, keys missing, suddenly you're logging nil, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And in a text format, that's harder to, or, in a special custom output format for Google Cloud or whatever. I think these issues are harder to detect. So it's important to remember that this is trying to improve on where we were before, where we didn't have any standard logging package at all. I assume in a couple of versions it's going to iron out and look a lot better.
Yeah. I intend to write a blog post about my experience, so stick around for that. I'll mention that on the show whenever it's...
You're that angry, huh?
I found a lot of gotchas I want to save other people from.
That's, I want to speak to your manager equivalent.
It's not a rant. It's going to be more of a how-to than a rant. There will be ranting sentences, but it's not a rant per se.
Yeah. And running out, another thing that popped up on our Slack channel, thanks Peter Aronoff for giving us this link. And Laura, I'm going to try the last name. I'm going to try it. Voranoha, maybe? Sorry if I totally butchered that. For a super interesting release from Google Security, something called Caps Lock. So you haven't read this blog post yet. So let me walk you through it.
Could you stop shouting at me in the meantime? Turn off your caps lock.
Nice. So supply chain attacks have been really in the headlines ever since Capital One breach. Do you remember that one? Where Capital One had
What's in your wallet?
Yeah. So they had a breach where their software supply chain was attacked. Some Docker image or library was actually malware way up in the, upstream dependencies, made it to production, and a whole bunch of credit cards got stolen. It also recently happened a lot in light of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where open source libraries, suddenly inject political messages into your output. You run npm install and suddenly you're seeing a whole bunch of Russian running on your terminal, or Ukrainian. You don't know what's going on. You see the Ukraine flag. And obviously in a lot of ransomware attacks, that was the injection path. Added some malicious code to a dependency. And the whole world, the security world, was focused on supply chain, trying to eliminate malicious code and vulnerabilities in your dependencies. Along comes Caps Lock and says, wait, when you import a library, you don't need to only worry about malicious code or vulnerabilities it introduces, like RCE or whatever. Without your knowledge, you don't know what that library is doing anyway. You don't know what its capabilities are right now, even if it's not malicious. For example, you import a logging library with the new slog package. You could assume that it only does like writing logs. But if you do capability analysis of that library, you can see that it sends network because somewhere in the code, it has support for sending messages out to, let's say, Google Cloud. Right? And what Caps Lock are coming and saying, there are two sides to this coin, which I'm really excited about. The first one is the technical one where they can analyze Go code because Go code is so simple and figure out what are the capabilities of a package. So you can go into your Go package, run Caps Lock here, or I don't remember exactly what's the command, but it's super easy to install. You run it and you see a list of all the things your package is capable of doing. You see it writing to files, reading from files, going out to network, dealing with memory, all these sort of things. And so technically, it's really cool that we can do it for Go. And I really hope to see, the Google security team rolling that out to other languages as well. For Go, I think it's maybe the easiest to do that. I believe that, trying to do it in Python or JavaScript is going to be a lot harder because dynamic languages are very hard to parse deterministically. But let's put the static analysis angle to the side. The security angle is so cool because they're basically creating a new market. They're saying, oh, you worried about supply chain and you worried about vulnerabilities so far, right? Okay. Now we also want to put the responsibility of thinking about what each library can do. And if that changes unexpectedly, suddenly, Go releaser gets a new release and suddenly they have access to unsafe memory. Like, why? Doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So you need to manage the capabilities of your dependencies now, which theoretically you should have done, right? When you import a new library, you should read all its code and verify it, but nobody does that. That doesn't make any sense. So I think it's either going to be like a dud because it only works for Go and doesn't get enough traction, or we're going to see like 15 new startups doing capability management, all the big shift left security providers, such as Orca where I work, but also Sneak and all these other companies that depend about inside GitHub. So Microsoft security, right? Google security, obviously, who came out with this tool. All these companies might be saying, okay, now I need to add this capability to my security offering as well. And it would be harder for library developers or malicious actors to introduce new capabilities into libraries. So I'm super excited about this blog post. I found it really interesting. It is very early. Like it only works for Go and I ran it on a few packages in our company and it only worked for like 3 out of 8. So it's still kind of rough around the edges.
All right.
But if you're into security, you should definitely check this out. Really, really interesting. And thanks a lot, Laura, for pointing that out to us.
Well, I think we are at the end of our list. This may be the first time we've done that in several weeks. We usually have to cut it off before we finish our backlog for the week. Stick around for an interview with Wilken Rivera, who is with the Go Developer Network. We'll be talking about what GDN, the Go Developer Network, is and does, and how they might be able to benefit you and your local Go community. So stick around for that.
See you there. This episode is sponsored by Koyab, as we mentioned in the intro. Koyab is a developer-friendly serverless platform to deploy apps globally and dear friend of the show. No ops, no servers, no infrastructure management. It all just runs in the cloud, automagically, which I don't like. Like I like dealing with servers and cables and whatever. But it's been so delightful that I'm turning around on it. If you have some web apps, some APIs, I have a web app, that's what I'm running there. Event-driven serverless functions, background workers, cron jobs. You can just shove it all on Koyab and they'll get it figured out. And I've been using it for a while. I like it. It works. And if you want to check them out, you can go to koyab.com, sign up with your GitHub, and spin up a project real quick. Although we would appreciate if you use the link in the show notes, because it has a little thing that tells Koyab we sent you. So they're going to treat you extra nice. Usually for backend developers, that's not a big deal, but their UI is just so slick, and they're really improving it all the time. I really like that focus on UX. It's not like fancy. It feels like working in a terminal, even though I'm in Chrome. Really good stuff. So go check out Koyab, and thanks Koyab for sponsoring the show.
I have a couple of projects I'm thinking about trying on Koyab myself. So maybe before long we'll both be users.
Well, you can utilize their kind of generous free tier. I'm saying kind of generous because it is really a free tier. It's not like, Amazon where you get credits and you have to pay for the service like a minimal. You get $5 a month, but it's limited to $5 a month because, at some point they got to start charging you for such a great service. Course. Let me just take a quick sip here.
Wait, that cup you're using looks really nice. Who made that?
Yeah, so if you head on to store.capago.com, you can check out .dev. Yeah. We don't have the .com. No. Maybe when we're rich. So if you go to store.capago.dev, you can grab one of two variants of cups. One with the old one with the text and the slightly busier logo, and the more minimalist one, which Andy really seemed to like.
Andy of last week fame, by the way. Our
and of fine fame. If you develop, applications in Go, you know who we're talking about. We're actually really happy with our supply right now. It's called Printify. They're not sponsoring us or anything. If anything, they take a pretty big cut out of every sale.
We're sponsoring them.
Yeah, maybe. A bunch of people asked. So we're using Printify. It's a print-on-demand thing. So, we don't have huge stocks. We don't have to worry about it too much. It was a fucking pain in the ass to set up. But once we got it set up, it's working and everything's shipping kind of nicely and nothing broke. Nobody reported any broken mugs on the way. And it's packaged up real nice. So thank you for, giving us some high-quality mugs. People have been happy with them. I've been putting them in the dishwasher a couple of times a week and they're still rocking. Finally, if you want to find us, talk to us, you can do it in our Slack channel, CupOGo, at the Gopher Slack with hyphens, so kebab case. You can also email us at news@cupogo.dev. That is news@cupogo.dev. If you like the show, please leave a review, and I'm going to go in order of where y'all are listening. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, Transistor site. Oh, that's directly on the site, actually. I don't know if you can leave a review or a rating there. Podcast Addict, AntennaPod, Embedded Players, Desktop Browsers, Castbox, Player FM, iTunes. iTunes is so low down the list. We keep saying iTunes, but I guess it's just a brand name. But it's actually Apple Podcasts.
There's
now.
Apple Podcasts and iTunes. I think Apple Podcasts has effectively replaced iTunes, hasn't it?
Yeah. So wherever you listen to your podcast, even if it's the gray other section in our analytics,
which is the curl command you use to download the MP3 file. That's how I do it.
Yeah. Curl and then a USB cable that comes out into, this tin can that you just put directly into your ear. So if you're listening there, you're probably not understanding what we're saying because the quality is so degraded. But we really appreciate it. If there's a way to rate on your, tin can, maybe you click it twice and it sends back a rating. Please do share the show. A lot of people have been listening recently. It's really fun to get all that feedback and love from the community. So thanks a lot. And we have a super interesting interview coming up with Wilken. So stick around and we'll talk to you all next week.
Until then.
Bye.
Hey, Shai.
Yo.
I know you're part of a Go meetup, and I'm part of a Go meetup, but a lot of our listeners might be listening from places like Fiji or who knows where, some little backcountry place where they don't have Go meetups.
Maybe some Go developers on oil rigs, offshore oil rigs.
Yeah.
You know what they could use?
What could they use?
I think they could use a bridge.
But ching.
Hey, Wilken.
Hey, how's it going? That's great. I love the pun. That was awesome.
I saw that coming a while away.
Yeah, that's good. It felt very natural. It was so great.
Yeah. Wilken, welcome to Cup of Go. I'm glad you're here. Tell us, before we dive into the questions, though, tell us a little bit about who you are and who you represent, what company or organization you're with.
Yeah, sounds good. So first and foremost, Jonathan Shai, thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to be here. So thank you. My name is Wilken Rivera. Sorry, I'm a software engineer from New York, originally from New York, currently based in Miami. I think as far as the organization that I'm with, I'm here sort of a member and a longtime contributor to GoBridge, right? Whose mission really is to grow, or if you will, increase the diversity within the Go community, right? Really sort of building that bridge, if you will, using education and technical resources to just help underrepresented communities, right? As a member of that organization, I work as the lead for the GDN. And for those that don't know, the GDN stands for the Go Developer Network. And its physical manifestation is really, it's a pro meetup network of 100 plus Go meetups around the world. And that's my focus. I volunteer my time there, just trying to figure out how I can help empower the next generation of Go developers through, sort of take on the continuation of the language and just sort of, increase the representation within our communities that we've grown to love.
Well, thanks for coming, first of all. And, before we dive into diversity, what does it mean for software engineering? What does Go developer? How can I help? And all like the things I think our listeners are expecting us to ask. I want to start with why. Like, why do you do this? I get why companies, like to say they do diversity because it looks good on their like company pages, and why communities like to say they are inclusive because it sounds nice. But actually volunteering your time, and actually having skin in the game. Why do you do this?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Shai. I mean, it goes back to where I come from, right? Like, so born and raised in New York City. I'm a product of my environment, my community, right? As a Latino within, in the industry, I just sort of growing up, right? It was all about family, who you know, right? And being able to sort of improve yourself based off of the people that you surround yourself with, right? Where it was all a collective. And with that mindset, it's always been about building community. So I started working with GoBridge. I don't know. I think I met Bill Kennedy at one of my first Gotham Go meetups, and he was talking about it. And there was just this feel of like community within Gotham Go, right? And I was like, oh man, I really like this. I really want to be a part of this. And as I got a chance to meet more folks, I started working with Katrina Owen as an open source developer. And I just really saw that community sort of manifest itself, right? And I got a chance to speak with Steve Francia, who was running Go at the time. And he's like, what he was trying to do with the community. And I enjoyed it. And that's who I am. So when given the opportunity to really pay it forward, right? Because that's where I am where I am because of my community. So I do what I do because I want to pay it back, right? I want to pay it forward. I want to show people, hey, you can gain so much more by just being part of the group, right? And within the US, you kind of have all these pockets where people just really come together. They have these hacking sessions and they grow, right? But when you start thinking about different countries, different continents, right? Those resources are light, man. And some of them not even in their own native tongue, right? So I do it because I know, hey, there's a plethora of information that we have access to that others don't. And I want to make sure that they get access to that, right? And that's really the driver, right? Just want to bring that out and show there's so much to gain from having different minds, different nationalities, different perspectives, just diversification, right? There's differences within the same group. And you can see, the beautiful things that we can create. So that's the why.
Well, thanks for sharing, man. So there are many dimensions of power when coming to tech. When you just get to a meeting and you want to talk about the design or whatever, you will come to a meetup and you see everyone around you. I just read a really good post we might put it in the show notes, even though it's not strictly Go related, called Dimensions of Power, which I really feel when you say I'm a product of my environment, that's where I came from and stuff like that. There's a lot of things in that list that are implied, you know what I mean? What's your formal authority? Where are you coming from? What organization are you in? What gender? What race? What's your accent? And I thought about a lot of these things because for me, I'm literally almost the most privileged person on earth. They all line up in my favor, at least where I'm in my local community. And it sets up sort of a different, when I come to diversity events or I want to help, stuff like Women Who Go, which we interviewed here, I feel a bit uncomfortable. So, I just want to say really thank you for coming and sharing this, even though you're talking to two basically white guys who are very comfortable in their industries right now and, looking more to contribute than to give. That's super awesome.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm again happy to be here, and I think and I'm glad that you called that out. And and I do want to say, like on the last episode, you had mentioned, the benefits of going to a meetup, and what just kind of like being able to ad hoc stand up and speak, right? And I think sometimes those little actions are what really separates us, right? Or just it really just kind of makes an influence, right? And I think that's the key, most important thing we want to think about when we walk into this room, especially if we're coming in, we're feeling, person of privilege. It's like, okay, how do we use that? To kind of make an influence here? How do we help bring up everyone else, right? And I think that's the mindset that we want to, the GDN, the Go community, right? That's all what we want to sort of walk into a room with, right? And share that same mindset. It's like, how do we help everyone else level up so that we level that playing field to the best of our ability, right? Because there's certain things that control that.
So let's talk about the Go Developer Network. What is it? I mean, obviously it has a mission to help the community, but like specifically, what services does it offer? Where is it? However you can answer that, because I'm sure many people have never heard of it before.
Great question. Yeah. So again, the Go Developer Network, mostly referred to as the GDN. And I think if anyone has gone to one of the meetup pages for any of the groups within the GDN, they'll see that nice little sort of GDN floating logo. Which is literally the letters GDN with a set of eyes over a cloud. So if you see that, that's the GDN.
Nice.
But I think so. A little historical fact: the GDN, right, is under the stewardship of GoBridge, right? GoBridge being the non-for-profit, and the GDN started back in 2019. I want to say I'm looking at the initial commits in GitHub, and it was a collaboration between GoBridge, right, who was again working with Bridge Foundry to do workshop with Google. Google and GoBridge came together to figure out, like, okay, to think, how can we increase diversification within the Go community? How do we expand, right, beyond what it is that people know Go for right now? And how do we ensure that people are getting the resources that they need, again, to grow, enjoy the language, take advantage of it, and in the community? So that's where it started. And the GDN, it really is, in short, the collective of Go user groups around the world, right? Right now we have 100 plus. When I started back in early January in 2023, now mind you, there's people here before me, but I started leading the program in 2023. We had over 200 meetups, and then we've made some changes where we wanted to sort of help the ones that were thriving or the ones that were really engaged, wanted to help them continue being successful. So we kind of shaved off some of the meetup groups and ask people to join others. Now, to your question of what we do. So the GDN, up until from day one, has always helped user groups get started, right? So that's like providing resources for someone who wants to start a meetup group, making those physical connections or, those virtual connections, if you will, for people to talk to, and then pay for meetup services, right? We know that running a meetup is hard, right? It takes time, it takes effort, it takes money. Right. So the GDN said, okay, well, we can help with the money part, right? We can help cover fees, and we can help provide or make the connection between, some sponsors that we know that want to contribute back. But then we fast forward to today, and we're doing more than that, right? Like we sent out a survey earlier this year, what we called the GDN engagement survey, where we're like, okay, of all the meetup groups that are part of this network, what's working for you? What's not? Right? What, are you still meeting? And if you're not meeting, what's keeping you from meeting? Right. And it was modeled after the goal survey, if you will, a little bit, right? Not as intricate, but still the general concept. And we got some good feedback, right? We got an opportunity to see the engagement, people that are interested, who want to hold meetups, people that are like, hey, like we run meetups because we have a really good network, right? Like for the women who go in Berlin, they have a really good framework for running successful meetups. And then we have other people, who are struggling, right? Who are like, hey, like we set up the group, but we haven't had a chance to have a meetup, or we've only held one. And that's where we're like, okay, we can do more, right? So our focus right now, and I'll stop after this for some questions, or I can go straight into detail, however you prefer. But we decided, okay, well, the two hardest things that meetups run into is finding a venue and sponsorship, or speakers, shall I say. So we've started to build out a directory for potential venue sponsors. We're sending out this survey to people who we worked with in the past and other organizations that we know host meetups, to say, hey, do you want to sign up to be a sort of a perpetual host for our meetups, so that when someone in Nigeria, someone in Brazil, or in Amsterdam says, hey, I need to host a meetup, I don't have a spot. Okay, you can reach out to us and we try to make that connection for you. Here's the directory. These are the people in your general location. Do you want to meet with them? And then the second problem is speakers, right? We have speakers all around the world. People do it remotely. It's sort of a blessing from the pandemic, where people got online and started having these sessions. We have a lot of YouTube content. We have all this stuff. And those same folks still want to contribute back and they want to speak. So we're building a speaker directory where we have people who sign up to speak and
Awesome.
they're there, and meetups can say, hey, I need a speaker in, my country. Do you know anyone? Or someone who wants to join via Zoom, and we make the connection, right? That's what we're doing now.
Sounds like I need to get on that directory.
Yeah. And this, there's not a lot of people on the directory yet. It just started. I mean,
right.
You two gentlemen, as as you said, meetup organizers and whatnot. That email kind of went out not too long ago, but yeah, it would be great. The more people, the merrier. It'll be great.
Cool.
So let me stop here for a second before we continue with the questions. Here's a good call to action. If you're listening on your car, don't write this down. Just wait till you park the car. But if you're just listening while you're working, stop for a second. If you're a senior Go developer and you spoke at a meetup, or if you work at a company that has a big enough room to host a Go meetup, go talk to Wilken. We're going to have a link on how to find him down in the show notes and connect to the GDN. But any Kappa Go help we can throw the project's way would be super great. And by the way, if you're listening and you're wondering, yeah, but do I have the time? Is it worth it? Usually it's worth it. The people who come from underrepresented backgrounds are not worse at programming. They just have less connections, so they don't get the jobs. If you get to these people first, you're gonna find better talent for your company or whatever just by virtue of these connections, because these are people who are not in the pool right now, right? So even in a selfish what do I get out of this way, usually you get really good connections and you get really good talent. But even in a selfless kind of way, you want to give back to the community. Whatever take you want to give on it, go talk to Wilken. We're going to have the link at the top of the show notes. So make sure you don't miss that.
Thank you, Shai. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
So there's one thing you talk about, it's local versus global, right? Your core vision is focusing on smaller local Go communities rather than the global Go community. You want to help that person in Nigeria, in Amsterdam, in Israel, and whatever, set up their meetup. What's the strategy behind this? Is the localized approach, does it have ripple effects on the broader community, or does it just make the lives of these 10, 15, 20 developers in that city better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, and I would like to say that I think it's the collective as a whole that makes the presence or help benefits everyone globally, right? I think once you have the feeling of being part of a community and understanding the support that you have locally, right? And then you start to sort of branch out into the global space, maybe going to, GopherCon Israel or GopherCon Berlin, all these events, right? Because GoBridge helps with that as well, because we provide scholarship for folks to attend. And I think once you have that solid foundation at home, I think it's very easy. It's easier for folks to sort of transition into a global space. And I think that, they can carry that. The idea is that they carry that feeling, that pride of hey, my local community gave back to me and now I'm going to do the same thing globally. And then I'm also going to help some other local community rise up, right? And I think one interesting talk that's coming up on, which is probably a really good example of this, there's a talk, I can't remember the gentleman's name, so I apologize in advance, but there is a talk from one of the speakers who was a GoBridge mentee, right? And he's going to talk about his experience going through the mentorship program as GoBridge, right? And then we have, at GopherCon, we also have some mentorship community day lined up from Exorcism, who is the official mentorship program from GoBridge, right? And now these are people are coming together to show everyone. And I think so it really, like anything, you start small, right? And then you kind of go, it blossoms. Well, I think the saying is, we build a mountain one pebble at a time, something along those lines, right? And I think that's the general idea, right? Where it's just you give people a solid foundation at home and then just watch the magic happen, because they're going to spread. They're going to be happy to talk about what's working for them and spread it with everyone else.
Nice. I do think that there is a global effect, not in the sense that necessarily you host virtual meetups or something like that, but more in the sense that people know that they have this psychological safety network. They know that their community is there somewhere in the background. They can feel it. And now, if you're listening and you're hearing about this for the first time, next time you're going to go to a meetup, you might be wondering, oh, is someone here from GDN? Is something what's going on here?
I mean, the answer to that question, Shai, is yes, right? Everybody's part of the GDN, It's we're all members of it, right? If you're part of the community, you're one of us, right? I think, it's probably a good opportunity to say, if you're thinking I would love to be part of that, the door's open. Reach out. We'll definitely figure out what we can do. We need representation locally, right? We're spread across the U.S. right now, and some folks in Europe. But the closer people are to the communities that they want to work with, the better, right? So everybody's a member. I said it here, and if you want to spend some time and take some action, reach out.
So I think it's a great opportunity to talk about exactly where and how people can reach out. I'm sure you have a website. Is that the best place to find GDN?
Yeah, so that's a work in progress, right? So we don't have a website. Okay. We have a few links, but I think the first thing, if you go to so gdn.gobridge.org, that takes you to the main Meetup Pro network, so you can get a chance to see all the Meetup groups that are part of the GDN, and you can reach out to any one of those local organizations or the local meetups. As far as the GDN, the administrative side of it, we have the link is gdn-organizer.gobridge.org, which is a mouthful. So I would just say, just go to the GoBridge GDN GitHub page. And that's where we sort of operate, right? We're setting the wiki up there. We have our code of conduct on there. We have our program charter, requirements for joining the GDN, how to get involved. We just added some GitHub template issues if you want to make a request or if you want to get involved. Or you can shoot us an email at gdn@gobridge.org, right? So that's what we have right now. I think we're organizing a little more. We're trying to build up the website and have that presence, right? But yeah,
very cool.
I feel like I said a lot. I don't know if I gave a clear answer on how to reach out.
I think you did. So okay. Yeah, so we'll have links to all that in the show notes, of course. But there's the GitHub page, email, and then you mentioned gdn.gobridge.org, which I just visited, and it shows a map of, is it Go Developers? Is that what it's showing?
Yeah, that's
groups.
Yeah, those are all the groups, right? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I have a few links that I can share because I feel like I can spit off a few. But I mean, if folks are listening and they're like, hey, what's that link for? Sign up to be a speaker. It's gdn.teach. It's teach.gdn community. And if you want to be a sponsor, it's sponsor.gdn.community. Like those are probably the two simplest links that we have. But lots of ways to reach out.
And in the GDN group, I already feel comfortable because we had Miki, who's the organizer of Go Israel. Mm-hmm. He was the first interview ever on CopperGo. And we had Yarden and Nofal, who are the organizers of Women Who Go Israel, who's also highlighted here on the map. I obviously did, I saw the map, and the first thing I did was go to my country and see what do we have there. And we have pretty good representation so far in CopperGo for GDN members, which is pretty cool. GDN organizers, I should say. I do have one extra link I want to highlight. GoBridge encourages people to become sponsors and donate to the cause. It's the only word you have in caps lock in your GitHub page. So first of all, when you go to the GitHub page and you're thinking about contributing or something like that, that's where it is. I do want to dive into that a little bit. How important are these partnerships and sponsorships and sustaining these activities, expanding these activities? What sort of contribution, made a really big impact recently, for example?
Well, I feel like that would probably be a better question for Bill. We can look at it in two perspectives, I guess, two ways, right? From a GoBridge perspective, right, which again is the stewardship of GDN, right? The funding that we've gotten there has helped three big things. One, it has continued sustaining the meetups, right? So like I said, we cover all the meetup fees, right? So for every meetup that's part of the GDN. So any meetup that is still operating right now, which is quite a bit, has had that benefit, right? We've had that opportunity to sort of give financial support to those meetup groups so that the organizers can focus on what they do, which is getting the content, right? Getting speakers, hosting, having these venues. Second thing is GopherCon EU was probably the last one. We provided scholarships to a few members of the community, the Go community from different parts of the world, right? I was honored. I had the privilege to be part of the community, sort of look at sort of the diversity applications to see people who were applying and how we can provide resources to them so that they can join these conferences. Again, these are folks who've never been to these conferences or a conference, per se, and now they had the opportunity to do so. It's not being offered for GopherCon US this year because they had the sort of a backlog because of the pandemic, so I feel like there were already other people who had already gotten scholarships. And then the general program events that are happening, right? So we sponsor, like I mentioned, Exorcism is the mentorship program, right? That because of the contributions that we got from our community, from Google or from other partners that we work with, we're giving back. And now we were able to donate to Exorcism, right? As part of the GoBridge Foundation, which, again, like I said, the mentorship program, official Go mentorship program, I'm struggling to say that. We're happy to be able to give to that, right? And I think on a sort of a smaller scale, Nolan is one of the partners or one of the folks that we work with recently. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they reached out. They had sponsored one of the Go Israel meetups, and it was a pretty successful meetup, if I'm not mistaken. And then we were able to sort of connect them with other folks. I think they just helped South Korea spin up one of their Go meetups and work with them. So these small partnerships, they're small, but they're making, a little ripple effects, and they're benefiting other local groups, right? So it's not, and I think that's the deal with the sponsorships, right? I think when you start to speak with like at a higher level, the GoBridge stuff, I think, any financial contribution, any sponsorship goes much further than just the GDN at that level. From a GDN perspective, the impact is, you have the opportunity to change someone's world, right? Seriously, like you make a contribution, you help this community come up, and now someone has the ability to be part of that. And then, you just let it flourish, and then, that's the outcome. But, now I'm kind of speaking in a hypothetical, but I'll pause. I feel like I'm rambling.
Oh, that's great.
So we talked about GDN GoBridge at large, like hypothetical, what's the organization for, but there are some like time sensitive initiatives we should discuss, right? Like conference, scholarship applications, and stuff like that. What's happening soon?
Yeah, great question. So right now, actually, you're sort of leading up.
Thank you. It's almost like it was planted.
So next week, next week we'll be starting GopherCon US, and I'm actually really excited to be part of that. We have five probably meetups lined up, and across the Neuro Spicy group, we have the Rainbow Alliance, we have a United Go. We have a Women Who Go meetup. And then we also have a meetup for meetup organizers, which is very interesting for those folks who are either existing meetup organizers or looking to get started, right? There's a few organizers who are going to be there. We're going to be talking about sort of sharing our stories, both good and horrible, if you will, or just learning experiences, if you will, about how to get started, how to maintain the velocity, and what it entails to actually be a meetup organizer. One of my GDN teammates, Paul, but I feel like I'm gonna butcher his last name, but is Bola. And he just wrote a post on what it is to be a meetup organizer, and it's on Medium. I'll share the link after. It's really it's sort of a good post to kind of see what it entails and how to get started.
Cool. So, and you're going to be physically there, right?
Yes, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there for the community day and the first day of the conference.
All right. So I'm going to try to manifest something to happen like kinetically in the real world from the podcast, which already happened a few times, with people getting cups and whatever. But if you listen to this interview and then you meet Wilken in the con, say, oh, from the podcast. Yeah, yo, dude, you're the dude from the podcast. Oh, actually, it's going to be a bit hard, right? Because they don't see you. So you should be looking for someone with the glasses, a really big smile, and a goatee. I assume you're not going to take the headphones with you, but if you're... So it's going to be sort of hard to recognize you based on that. But that would be cool if someone listened to this and then going to GopherCon US and they meet you up.
Tell them Brewster sent you.
Yeah, tell them Brewster sent you. That was what I was looking for.
Sounds good. No, I look forward to anybody. If I'll most likely be at pretty much every meetup, I'll be at the community day things, and we'll have a shirt that says GDN on it. I like to print custom shirts for these things, so I'll have one of those on too. So if anything, just look out a GDN shirt.
Is there anything else lined up other than next week?
Other than next week, it's nothing's lined up just yet, but after next week, after GopherCon, and chatting with the GDN, with the other folks on the GDN, we're going to start thinking about workshops, right? Reintroducing workshops, how to get workshops back into the community, and providing curriculum, which is something that's sort of the third part of what we're trying to do with the GDN, which is essentially reaching out to all the content creators that are out there creating content for Go and having them donate some of their, content that we can provide to meetup organizers for workshops. So that's going to come after. I think we're going to go all in on that once we have right after the directory and we have a nice little roster of people to reach out to. So that's it on the event front.
That's really cool.
Awesome. Well, we're coming to a close here, and we usually have our two questions that we like to close our interviews with. Gun to your head, you have to remove a feature from Go. What's leaving the language?
What's leaving the language? Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a good answer for that. I think, there's some features that I've never used but I think, I don't know. It's very controversial. I think I haven't used it that much enough to say it, but I think the generic side of things has sort of increased the difficulty in reading some of the some of the code that's written. I wouldn't remove it because I haven't used it enough to understand it. But I think like right now, that's the one thing that I'm like, oh, I wish it could be a little better, right? Just understanding how things work there.
That's a popular answer. It might be the most popular answer. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Although it's also very popular.
Yeah, it's also popular for some people on the other side. Controversial is a good description.
It's like when you go to Reddit and you want to find the best drama, then you sort by controversial and you find the posts that are like directly on zero. That's exactly where generics is right now, I think. But the flip side is obviously, what would you add to go from, all the other programming space?
I think Go's done a good job already. And I think, with keeping the simplicity of the language, right, and making it approachable, I really think one of the things that drew me to Go was because it's sort of built by some of the pioneers already. And I think a lot of their learnings from those different languages have sort of, made Go what it is, right? So it's hard for me to think of like one thing that I'd want to take from another language, to be honest with you. I think I would sort of answer that question. It's like, I wouldn't be so quick to pull anything from other languages just so that it feels like something we're used to. Right. And I think when I'm again, kind of being honest with the generics thing, I didn't know it was a thing until it became a big discussion, we need to add this to Go. I'm like, well, what is that? Right. Like I've never used it. And then I learned more about it. I'm like, oh, so I don't have a clear answer to that, like what I would pull. Right. I think there's probably some great things there, but I also understand that there's some functionality in the language that was intentionally left out because it's sort of forcing us to think how to do this thing, and how to write this code as opposed to just relying on the standard library, right? For some of the simple things, right?
Mm-hmm. Then here's a thought. How about taking the aesthetics and merch from JavaScript conferences into Go meetups? All the Go meetups I've been to are very scruffy, pizza and beer, and we're gonna dive into JSON code and slides with code immediately. And all the web developer conferences I've been to, everybody dressed nice, and it's all dark mode on the walls, and nobody's pulling out Linux machines. Everything's like Mac and beautiful. Maybe we can grab something in meetup land. You know what I mean?
That's fair. It's so funny. I'm a big believer of the sort of, the paper bag, the idea of like, hey, you give me a paper bag with the bare necessities and I'll figure my way out. Right. So I kind of like that scrappiness, that scruffiness of these meetups, because I feel like when you're in that environment, you have no choice but to find the way out. Right. And sort of go into the details of it. And then you come out much stronger. Right. So I don't know. So that's just sort of my take on that. So.
Cool.
Awesome.
Sorry. Not the best of answers, y'all. I didn't have any clear cut, what I would add, what I would take away. You definitely stumped me.
That's the point.
All right. That's all right.
Well, Wilken, thanks a lot for coming on, man. And, thanks a lot for your work in the GDN. That's super awesome. If you want to reach out, we already mentioned a few times, just go to the show notes. You can find all the links you need there. And like Wilken said, the door is open. The virtual door is open.
Sure is. Well, thanks, Wilken. It's been a pleasure. I hope we keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan and Shai. Much appreciated. Really a pleasure to be on here. And thanks for helping us out on the GDN side and bringing me on. Again, super excited and I'm blessed to be on this podcast. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. All right, Wilken is off the call now, and there are a couple things we want to mention. First of all, thanks a lot, Wilken, for coming on. That was super great, and keep doing great work. If you're a meetup organizer, you have a channel in the Gopher Slack for sharing ideas, resources, asking for help. It's hashtag meetup organizers, makes sense. And the GDN team also has GDN meetups channel in Gopher Slack. We want to mention these two resources as well. We know there's a whole bunch of resources in this episode, but just a couple more if they're relevant to you. Thanks a lot for listening. Thanks again, Wilken, for coming on. And we'll talk to you all next week.